Daniel Sterling had everything a man could want. Money more than 3 generations could burn through. Power, the kind that made CEOs straighten their ties before he walked into the room. And a name that didn't just open doors, it removed them entirely. But there was one thing missing. One crack in the marble. One shadow that no boardroom victory could chase away. 8 months ago, his wife left. She didn't fight. Didn't scream. Didn't ask for anything. She just disappeared. Like smoke. Like she had made the quiet, devastating decision that she was worth more than the half-life Daniel was offering her. And tonight, at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, he was about to see her again. But not in a penthouse. Not at a gala. He was about to watch her serve his dinner. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's story. Before we go any further, if this story already has your attention, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? We genuinely love hearing from you. Now, let's go back to that restaurant. The restaurant was called Meridian, and it was the kind of place where even the silence felt expensive. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls above the dining room. The floors were dark marble, polished to a mirror finish. Every table was dressed in ivory linen, every glass was crystal, and every guest, politician, mogul, celebrity, wore the quiet, comfortable expression of people who had never once worried about a bill. Daniel Sterling walked through the entrance at exactly 8:15. He moved the way powerful men move, not fast, not slow, but with the absolute certainty that the world would wait for him. Beside him walked Isabella Grant. She was stunning in a sleek crimson dress that caught every light in the room, her jewelry catching fire from the chandeliers above. She smiled at the right moments, stood at the right angle, and looked to anyone watching like the perfect ornament for a man like Daniel. Mr. Sterling. The maitre d' appeared instantly, almost breathless. Your table is waiting, sir. We've reserved the best view in the house. Of course they had. They sat. Daniel's phone was already in his hand before the water glasses were filled. Isabella exhaled slowly. Could you put that away? Just for one evening. It's the Singapore deal, he said, without looking up. It closes tonight. Everything closes tonight with you, Daniel. He set the phone face down on the table. Not because she was right, but because he was tired of the conversation. His eyes drifted to the window, to the city lights blurring in the glass, and for one unguarded second, his mind went somewhere he'd trained it not to go. 8 months ago. Coming home to a penthouse that still smelled like her perfume but held none of her warmth. Finding the ring on the kitchen counter. No note. No goodbye. Just the quiet, final language of a woman who had run out of hope. Sophia. He pushed the thought away. Hard. She left. That was her choice. He had moved on. He had. He was reaching for the menu when he heard footsteps approach the table. Soft. Careful. Unhurried. Good evening. Welcome to Meridian. May I start you with still or sparkling water? The voice was quiet. Professional. Perfectly composed. But something about it reached inside Daniel's chest and pulled. He knew that voice. He knew it in the dark. He knew it mid-laugh. He knew it in the way it sounded when it was trying very hard not to cry. Slowly, the way you approach something fragile, something that might shatter if you moved too fast. Daniel lifted his eyes from the menu. And his entire world stopped. Standing beside his table, holding a small notepad, dressed in a simple black waitress uniform, was Sophia. His Sophia. The woman he had not seen in 8 months. The woman he had told himself over and over that he no longer needed. But that wasn't the thing that turned his blood cold. Because Sophia Sterling, his ex-wife, the woman who had vanished without a word, was pregnant. Visibly. Undeniably. Heavily pregnant. The noise of the restaurant fell away. Isabella's voice, the clink of crystal, the soft jazz from the corner. All of it dissolved into silence. Daniel couldn't breathe. Sophia stood perfectly still, her pen poised above her notepad, her expression a masterclass in composure, like she had rehearsed this exact moment. Like she had known it was coming and had decided, somewhere in those 8 months, exactly how she would survive it. Their eyes met. 1 second. 2. In her eyes, Daniel saw exhaustion. He saw quiet strength. He saw a woman who had carried something enormous, completely alone, and had refused to break under the weight of it. And then his gaze dropped, helplessly, involuntarily, to her belly. Whose baby? The question rose in his mind before he could stop it. When? How long has she? But deep inside, in the part of him that had never fully let her go, Daniel Sterling already knew the answer. And it shattered him. The restaurant was called Meridian, and it was the kind of place where even the silence felt expensive. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. Every guest a name someone recognized. Daniel Sterling fit here the way a blade fits a sheath. Perfectly, effortlessly, without question. He sat across from Isabella, who looked stunning in red and knew it. The maitre d' had practically bowed, bringing them to their table. The wine was already breathing. Everything was exactly as it should be. Daniel's phone buzzed. Singapore. He glanced at it. "You promised," Isabella said. 1 minute. "You said that 20 minutes ago." He set the phone down without responding. Outside the window, the city burned in the dark 30 floors below, indifferent and endless. His eyes stayed there longer than they should have, and in the quiet between one breath and the next, his mind slipped somewhere he'd spent 8 months training it not to go. A penthouse. A kitchen counter. A ring sitting alone in the silence where a marriage used to be. Sophia. He pulled himself back. Reached for the menu. That was when he heard the footsteps. Soft. Measured. Approaching their table with quiet, unhurried care. "Good evening. Welcome to Meridian. May I start you with still or sparkling water?" The voice stopped him cold. He knew that voice. He knew it in the dark. He knew it mid-laugh, unguarded and real, the way it softened at the edges when she was holding something heavy inside. Slowly, Daniel lifted his eyes from the menu. And his entire world stopped. Sophia Sterling stood beside his table in a simple black waitress uniform, notepad in hand, expression composed, like she had rehearsed this exact moment and decided she would not break. Their eyes met. And for the first time in 8 months, Daniel Sterling couldn't breathe. He couldn't look away. Not from her face, still composed, still heartbreakingly steady, and not from the thing his eyes had dropped to without permission. The front of Sophia's uniform pulled gently forward, the unmistakable curve of a pregnant belly impossible to miss now that he was looking. Now that he couldn't stop looking. The room kept moving around him. Glasses clinked. Conversation hummed. Isabella was saying something. Pregnant. The word detonated silently inside his chest. 8 months. She had been gone 8 months, carrying. "Excuse me." Isabella's voice cut through the fog. Sharp. Pointed. The tone she used with people she had already decided were beneath her. "You've been standing there for nearly a minute. Are you going to take our order or just hover?" Sophia didn't flinch. She adjusted her grip on the notepad and opened her mouth to respond with the same professional calm she'd worn since the moment she approached. But Isabella wasn't finished. "I'd also suggest being more careful around the tables. In your condition." A thin smile. "We wouldn't want an accident." The words landed like a slap. Something moved through Daniel. Fast, hot, and completely beyond his control. "Isabella." His voice came out quiet. The kind of quiet that had ended boardroom arguments and stopped negotiations mid-sentence. "Enough." Isabella blinked. I said enough." The table went silent. Around them, a few nearby guests glanced over. Daniel didn't care. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on Isabella with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not anger exactly, but something older and more dangerous than anger. He turned back to Sophia. She was watching him with those steady brown eyes, her face unreadable, her pen still poised above the notepad. Waiting. Enduring. Refusing, with every quiet line of her body, to be diminished. He found her near the service corridor, moving with the careful, deliberate pace of someone who had decided that if she just kept moving, none of this could catch her. "Sophia." She didn't stop. "Sophia." Louder this time, though not unkind. She stopped. Turned. And the composure she wore was so complete, so thoroughly constructed, that it was almost worse than if she had broken down entirely. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Sterling?" The name hit him like a closed door. Mr. Sterling. Not Daniel. Not the name she had whispered against his shoulder on their wedding night, or called across the kitchen on slow Sunday mornings, or said in the dark in all the ways a person says someone's name when that name belongs to them completely. Mr. Sterling. Formal. Professional. The name she would give a stranger. He stood very still. "You don't have to do that. I'm working." Her voice was even. "If there's nothing else." "There is something else." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Around them the kitchen hummed, staff moving past with practiced efficiency, no one paying them particular attention. Sophia, he stopped. Searched for the word. Found only the truth. How long? That's not a conversation for the restaurant floor, Mr. Sterling. There it was again. That name wielded like distance. Then have it with me somewhere else. 5 minutes. Something flickered across her face. Too fast to name, gone before he could reach it. She looked down at her notepad, then back up at him, and in her eyes he saw the calculation of a woman weighing the cost of every available option. 5 minutes, she said finally. Then I go back to work. She said it the way someone agrees to a thing they have already decided will change nothing. Daniel wasn't so sure she was right. They stood in the narrow alley behind the restaurant, the city's noise reduced to a distant murmur. A single light above the service door cast everything in pale yellow. Sophia had her arms folded, not in anger, but in the way of someone holding themselves together from the outside. Daniel waited. She looked at the ground for a long moment. Then she looked at him. I found out 3 days after the divorce was finalized. The words landed softly, devastatingly. 3 days, he repeated. I sat in a pharmacy bathroom for an hour. A short, humorless breath that wasn't quite a laugh. I didn't know whether to cry or disappear. You chose disappear. Her eyes sharpened. I chose protect. She said the word with a quiet ferocity that stopped him from saying anything else. You know what your family does with leverage, Daniel. You've watched them do it your entire life. A sterling heir. She shook her head. That baby would have become a negotiation before it ever took its first breath. He opened his mouth. Your father would have had lawyers at my door within a week, she continued, her voice steady and certain, the voice of someone who had run this calculation 1,000 times in the dark. Custody arrangements designed to minimize me. Non-disclosures. Conditions. The child raised inside that world, shaped by those people. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I couldn't let that happen. So you disappeared. Alone. With nothing. With everything that mattered. The words fell between them and sat there, undeniable. Daniel looked at her. Really looked, perhaps for the first time in longer than 8 months. At the exhaustion she carried, the quiet ferocity, the absolute refusal to apologize for choosing her child over his comfort. And somewhere beneath the guilt beginning to rise in his chest, he understood exactly why she had run. Isabella was waiting for him at the table, her wineglass nearly empty, her patience entirely so. She watched him cross the dining room with the particular expression of a woman who had been composing her argument while he was gone and was now ready to deliver it. 20 minutes, she said. Daniel sat down. Said nothing. You left me at the table for 20 minutes to chase a waitress, Daniel. Her voice was low, controlled, designed to inflict maximum damage without disturbing the neighboring tables. Do you have any idea how that looked? I don't care how it looked. The honesty of it seemed to genuinely surprise her. She's your ex-wife. Isabella set her glass down with a precision that suggested she wanted to throw it. Whatever she was to you, that chapter is finished. She is a waitress. She is not your problem. She's carrying my child. Silence. Isabella stared at him. Something moved behind her eyes. Not hurt, he noticed. Not heartbreak. Something closer to recalculation. The rapid, almost imperceptible adjustment of someone reassessing a situation that had just changed its terms. You don't know that, she said finally. I do. Another silence. Longer this time. So what does that mean? Her voice had shifted, the warmth entirely gone now, replaced by something stripped and transactional. For your reputation. For the board. Because a scandal like this right before the Singapore deal closes. That's what you're thinking about right now. She blinked. I'm being practical. You're thinking about the deal. He looked at her. Really looked the same way he had just looked at Sophia, and saw with sudden and complete clarity the difference between the two women. That's all this has ever been for you, hasn't it? The deal. The name. The access. Isabella said nothing, which was, Daniel realized, the only answer he needed. He found her in the dining room, clearing a table at the far end of the floor. She moved slowly, carefully, the kind of careful that wasn't caution but exhaustion, the deep, bone-level tiredness of someone who had been on their feet for hours and was running purely on the decision not to stop. Her hand pressed briefly against the small of her back when she thought no one was watching. Daniel was watching. He crossed the room, flagged down the floor manager. A compact, efficient man who recognized Daniel Sterling's expression and understood immediately that this was not a request. "The woman working this section," Daniel said quietly. "What time does her shift end?" "Midnight, sir." It was 9:40. "It ends now. I'll cover whatever she's owed for the remainder. Arrange it." The manager opened his mouth, closed it, and nodded. Daniel walked to Sophia. She saw him coming and straightened, composure snapping back into place like a reflex. "I'm working." "Not anymore. Daniel. Your shift is done. The manager has everything." He kept his voice low, steady, not commanding. He understood instinctively that commanding her would end this before it began. "There's a car outside. Private. No press, no cameras. Just somewhere quiet where you can sit down and not be on your feet for the first time in." He stopped. "How long have you been on shift?" A pause. "Since noon." "Nearly 10 hours. Something moved across his face that he didn't try to hide. She saw it, and he let her see it, because she deserved at least that much honesty from him. For a long moment she looked at him, searching his face for the angle, for the terms, for whatever condition was attached. She found nothing but a man who was, perhaps too late, finally paying attention. "Okay," she said quietly. He hadn't planned to go in. He told himself he would drive her, wait in the car, give her the space she hadn't asked for but clearly needed. He told himself this was her appointment, her decision, her life, and that the most respectful thing he could do was stay behind the glass door of the clinic and let her have it. He made it as far as the waiting room. Sophia hadn't told him to leave. That was the thing. She had glanced at him when they arrived, something unreadable moving across her face, and then simply walked to the reception desk without a word either way. He had interpreted the silence as permission and followed, and now he sat beside her in a small, quietly lit room while a technician moved a handheld device across the curve of her belly. Neither of them spoke. The screen on the wall showed shapes he couldn't immediately interpret. Shadows and light shifting in gray tones, a world rendered in sound. Then the technician smiled. "There," she said softly. Strong heartbeat. The sound filled the room. Fast. Steady. Insistent. The most ordinary and extraordinary sound Daniel had ever heard in his life. A small, fierce drumbeat that had been keeping time in the dark for months without him, without his knowledge, without his protection. His throat closed. He had sat in boardrooms while billion-dollar decisions hung in the air and felt nothing but focus. He had negotiated through crises that broke other men and never once lost his composure. He felt his eyes burn and did nothing to stop it. Sophia turned to look at him. He didn't hide his face. Something shifted between them in that small room. Quiet, irreversible, the specific kind of change that doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes true. He made 2 calls the following morning. The first was to Isabella. It was brief. He told her clearly, without cruelty and without apology, that whatever they had been to each other was finished. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, and then asked, not about them, not about what went wrong, but about the Singapore deal, and whether this would affect the Meridian Group's position on the merger. Daniel hung up. The second call was harder. The board convened at 9. 7 men and 2 women who between them controlled more capital than most small nations. Seated around a table Daniel had sat at for 15 years. He stood at the head of it and told them plainly that he was stepping back from the Singapore negotiations for personal reasons, effective immediately, and that Marcus Webb would take the lead until further notice. The silence that followed was the particular kind that precedes an earthquake. Personal reasons. Gerald Holt, the oldest board member, removed his glasses slowly. In the middle of a $10 billion deal. Yes. Daniel. Gerald's voice carried the careful patience of a man who believed everything had a price. Whatever this is, whatever she is, it can be managed quietly. These things always can. It's not a thing to be managed. Daniel gathered his folders. I have a child coming into the world. That takes precedence. Your reputation will survive. He buttoned his jacket. And if it doesn't, that tells me everything I need to know about what I've been building. He walked out before anyone could respond. For the first time in 15 years, he didn't look back. The headlines lasted 2 weeks. Sterling steps back from Singapore deal. Sources cite personal crisis. The tabloids were less polished. One ran a photo of Daniel outside the clinic, grainy and taken from distance, with a headline that used the word scandal 3 times in 4 sentences. His publicist called twice a day for a week. He answered once. The world had opinions. He had stopped collecting them. What he had instead was a spare bedroom in Sophia's small apartment and a disagreement about the color of the walls. "Ivory," Sophia said, holding up a paint swatch. "It looks white. It's warm white. There's a difference." "There isn't." She gave him a look he recognized from years ago. Patient, faintly amused, the expression of a woman who had already decided and was simply allowing him the illusion of the conversation. He had missed that look more than he'd known how to say. "Ivory," he agreed. They were not fixed. He understood that clearly, and he believed she did too. There were conversations still waiting, about the years he had sleepwalked through their marriage, about the coldness she had absorbed quietly for too long, about the months she had spent alone carrying a weight that should have been shared. Those conversations would come. He wouldn't rush them and he wouldn't avoid them. But today there was paint on Sophia's left hand and a small pile of flat-pack furniture neither of them knew how to assemble, and the afternoon light was coming through the window in a way that made the room feel like something worth protecting. Daniel looked around the half-finished nursery. Then he looked at Sophia. This, he thought, was the only deal that had ever truly mattered. And that is where we leave them, not perfect but together. And sometimes that is enough. If this story got to you, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. We read every single one. Subscribe if you are new. We post every week and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Share this with someone who needs a good story today. We will see you in the next one.